Hi there, this is a video about factoring by grouping. Now, factor by grouping is a technique when a technique for factoring when you have four terms. Okay, and I'm going to go through two different examples of factor by grouping, and I'm going to do some relatively complicated ones with some larger numbers. But let's go ahead and start off with our first example, all right? And we're going to do 15x cubed minus 21x squared plus 40x minus 56, okay? So in an example like this, the goal is, when you look at this, you've got four different terms. All right, so it's not three terms, so you can't use, the AC method or the box method on this and things like that. And on this one, there are no common factors, so I can't factor out a GCF. But what I do is when you have four terms, typically when you've got something with an x cubed, x squared, x to the first, and then no x, what you do is you come in here and you group them. You group your first two terms and you group your last two terms. Then what you do is you look at these two terms and you say, okay, what is my greatest common factor out of this? And the greatest common factor, what you can factor out of that is you can factor out a 3x squared. Okay, then you are left with, at this point, then you've got a 5x and then minus 7, okay? And then we're going to repeat that process over here. And when I look at this, when I look at 40x and negative 56, I have a common factor of 8. All right, so I'm going to do a plus 8. And then you are left with, once you do that, 5x minus 7. And that's the whole goal of this, is to be able to look at this and say, okay, once I group them and I factor out a greatest common factor from each group, I should have a common binomial term. Now, here's the tricky part. Here's the part that took me years to realize. At this point, what you can factor out is this entire group, 5x minus 7. And you can write that then as 5x minus 7 and then times 3x squared plus 8. Okay, that in essence is how you do this. Now, if you don't get a common binomial factor here, then you can't factor that and you have to try another method, okay? But that's the idea, all right? So now this is your answer to this problem. And let's go ahead and do another one so I can show you another example of a different type of problem that you'll encounter. Okay, the next example, same thing. You've got four terms here. Your largest exponent is 3, 2, 1, and then no variable term here. I can't factor out a greatest common factor right off the bat, so we'll have to try something else. The part we're still going to do this with factoring by grouping. The problem is this term right here. When you're subtracting this third term, the signs can get all screwed up. So what I like to do is I rewrite this entire polynomial as plus this. The only thing I'm changing here, I'm going to change this to a plus negative 9x. And then plus 15, okay? That's going to help me keep our groups together, keep the signs where they need to be. That's just what helps me. So let's go through this process. What can you factor out of here? Your greatest common factor that you can factor out is an x squared, all right? So let's factor out an x squared, and then you're left with 3x minus 5, okay? And that's important. Once we do this, once we factor out that greatest common factor, we want to replicate that same thing over here. Now, on this one, again, our goal here is to get a 3x minus 5 factor. So because of this negative 9 and the plus 15, that gets a little screwed up. So we got to be savvy enough to realize that, okay, in order to make this turn this into a positive 3x, we would have to factor out a negative 3 out of that. Then you're left with positive 3x. And then, if you factor out a negative 3 from a positive 15, that's going to become a minus 5. All right, and that's the idea. So you have the same binomial factor here. That's the goal. Once you have that, you can factor out that binomial factor, 3x minus 5, and then you're left with x squared minus 3. Okay? Now, I know that this last step going from here to here is a little confusing. And what I want to do is I'm going to rewrite this. And I'm going to rewrite this this step here. And I'm going to write it as this, x squared, and then instead of writing the binomial, I'm going to write smiley face, okay? I like to do that a lot of times to get people to see different things and use smiley face as my variable. Now, this is a whole term, same as this over here. And the question is what can you factor out of this of each of these terms? Well, you can factor out a smiley face. Okay, so if you factor out a smiley face, then you're left with x squared minus 3. So that's just something that I do to help that. Because it's easy to sit here and, look at each of these and go, okay, I know how to factor out an x squared. That's fine. I can factor out a negative 3. That's fine. But once you have this step here where you have this common binomial term, it's hard to factor out that 3x minus 5. I mean, it's not hard to factor it out. It's just a little confusing. So it's not something that's easily seen, but you are factoring out a 3x minus 5. And I can show you that here. It's a little bit easier to see when you have a smiley face versus a binomial. That's just something that helps me. So that's all I got. So hopefully this made sense. Please reach out if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.